In this video, we'll begin with learning how to draw using perspective, and we will investigate why perspective is so important for realist artists to know how to do. Let's start. So everyone knows that perspective is a thing that we perceive all around us. It's part of how we intuitively understand the world we live in. We know that objects that are closer to us appear larger than a similar object that is further away. And as artists, we need to emulate how objects appear to us in the real world in terms of hue, value, form and textures. But we also need to show how objects behave relative to us and to other objects. And perspective is a way in which we can show that using relative scale. It tells the viewer of the artwork that the objects in the painting live in a 3D world just like our objects in the real 3D world. So let's look at understanding the fundamentals of linear perspective from the beginning. Before we start any piece of art, especially when working from life, it's important to establish your eye level, as this will also determine how you perceive the objects in your still life, the buildings in your landscape, or even the model in your portrait. This eye level is also referred to as a horizon line, and it stretches out to infinity. It's a line that isn't always visible, but spans 360 degrees all around you depending on your direction you face, and remains a constant relative to you. When drawing people, for example, everyone that is of your height will share your eye level or horizon line, and all of their eyes will be at the horizon line right into the distance. Have a look at this example. So I've set up the camera exactly at my eye level, so we both share the same horizon line. No matter how far or near I place myself relative to the camera, my eye level remains the same. And it's my feet that appear to change height within the frame. It looks like the ground plane rises up towards my eye level the further back you go. This is just in the vertical axis, but in fact it happens on both axes, the vertical and the horizontal, which is why proportions diminish with distance. It only changes when I actually change my height by standing up on something higher or standing in a dip lower. So we start with a horizon line which indicates our eye level, and plot a point somewhere along it. This is called a vanishing point, as many of the lines in our image appear to converge at this single point and vanish from our sight. Here are some great examples of one-point perspective. The single vanishing point can be used for compositional effect. Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper has the focal point on Jesus' head for this very reason. So let's draw our first shape. Start off by drawing a square, then extend the corners to the vanishing point. After connecting two adjacent corners, you'll have drawn a triangle. This determines the height of the back edge. The height won't extend outside of this triangle. Draw it in and join up the last edge. Practice drawing a few more before moving on. So surprise surprise, two-point perspective has two vanishing points that still have to appear somewhere along the horizon line. This time we start by drawing the edge of the cube nearest us. Link the top and bottom to our two vanishing points and continue from there. Most often in real life, the 2 points are very far apart from each other, as parallel line convergence is quite subtle and actually happens over very long distances. If the 2 points are quite close together, you get some very odd foreshortening happening which isn't so realistic, and it looks a bit fisheye wide-angle lensed. So with a one-point perspective, we started by drawing a square perpendicular to us, but now it rotates a little bit and things change. One set of parallel lines converge on one vanishing point, while the parallel lines perpendicular to them converge on the other vanishing point. Anything that appears above our height, above our eye line, gets drawn above the horizon line, and anything below our height, below our eye line, goes below the horizon line. So with this concept in mind, we can use people as a reference for scale to draw our scenes correctly. So this is a quick demonstration of drawing two buildings from our imagination. So we'll start with the two vanishing points, vanishing point 1 and 2. In this case they're going to be on the paper, visible, but I'll show you what the difference is when they're off the paper. So we start by drawing in the nearest edge of the building, and then we join up the top and bottom to both vanishing points. Then we draw in the outer edges of each of the building, and then complete the cube. Makes me want to put in the roof. So in general, the apex of a roof is above the center of a face. So we just draw an X from corner to corner, and where they join in the middle is the center of the face. So we just extend that up and plot in the apex of our roof and then join it to the top corners. We then extend the apex of the roof to the vanishing point 2 to find the ridge of the roof. And just for now, just draw it parallel to the other slope to finish off the first house. So the second house is going to be a little bit taller, but essentially the same house but rotated 90 degrees. As a little extra, we're going to put a little extension porch on the front. To do this, we just start by extending it out of the front and then extruding it upwards and then adding a little slope roof on, as you'll see how to do that in a second. And then we add the windows and we're done. So the second demo is exactly the same two buildings, but with the vanishing points way outside of the canvas. And as you can see here, what I'm doing is making a perspective grid. So I'm basically drawing radial lines from each of the vanishing points. These would give me guidelines as to how to draw my diagonal lines. So all I need to do is basically either draw between or on the lines without crossing them to have my perspective lines correct. And you'll see very clearly right from the get-go that the distortion doesn't really happen, and it's a more realistic drawing. So when you're actually doing your art for real, you'll probably want to extend your two vanishing points outside of your canvas. You can do this with taping bits of paper to the outside of your canvas and extending them out that way, or you could use a very long ruler. So as a bonus tip for you watching the video this far, what happens to faces of objects that aren't horizontal or vertical? Surely perspective rules still apply to those. How do we draw them? Supposing we have a greetings card on a table that's slightly ajar. What you do is draw in the horizontal plane first, then the angled edge. Extend it up until it meets a point exactly above the vanishing point of the horizontal plane. The other edge then connects to that point. This is the same for faces and objects that are at a different angle to the ones already drawn, but instead of the vanishing point being above an existing one, it's further along the horizon line. This video is just a basic level of perspective. There are so many more advanced techniques to cover at a later date. For now, I recommend getting a large sheet of paper and practice the techniques learned today. It's so fun and satisfying to get perspective drawing correct. Try it. I also recommend to try them freehand to train your hand-to-eye coordination rather than grabbing a ruler. In the meanwhile, please help my channel grow by subscribing and watching more of my tutorials to tell the YouTube algorithm my channel's worth promoting to others. Bye!